So tell me about Carolina Crimes podcast. How did you get the idea for this, and kind of where are we and how did it start?
Okay, what Carolina Crimes is, of course, you said it's a new podcast. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio now. Mm-hmm. As of 2 days ago, they picked it up. Really anywhere podcasts are heard. What it is, it's the only weekly episodic podcast dedicated to the true crimes of South Carolina. So there's, having
no shortage of stories there, I'm sure, right?
There's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a ton of true crime podcasts out there. There seems to be a lot of interest in that.
Yeah.
But none really specific to the state of South Carolina. And there is like you said, a ton of material.
Well, you seem to be really honing in on like a critical thesis or idea for a podcast, because all I know is anecdotally, like my wife sits there and watches true crime stuff on Netflix like nightly. Yes. She loves that stuff. And that seems to be just a growing genre of entertainment or media. But like you said, I haven't heard of anyone or anything focusing on any specific geography, let alone our own state. And what have you found? I mean, you must have started with the idea that, okay, there's so many things here. Are you surprised by just the mountain of stories? I mean, do you feel like it's almost infinite?
Absolutely. We could do this. I'm 41. We could do this till I'm 100 years old, and we're gonna have a new episode weekly, and we wouldn't run out of material.
So how far back are you going? Because this state, South Carolina, has been around for a long time.
So far, we've got 3 episodes out. The earliest one we've done, it started in 1940. Mm-hmm. We're talking about going back to the 1700s to the first female serial killer in South Carolina, Lavinia Fisher, down in Charleston, getting involved some of the pirate crimes.
Yeah,
in the 1600s. I mean, we're going to dive into some of that too.
And there's some rather notorious characters, like Blackbeard was active along the South Carolina coast during that time, I'm sure.
Right, and it surprised me reading about the blockades of these pirates, and that you could actually block off an entire city at that point in time, and any kind of goods, treasures, rum, food, textiles coming in or out of the port, you could just plunder it and pick what you wanted.
Can you imagine, like, going to Charleston and say, who are those folks out there? Oh, they're just the pirates. They're blockading the city.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world? I can't imagine anything like that happening now. Is there, I imagine you've kind of come across a lot, but is there a particular story recently that you've come across that you're just really excited for that episode? You can't wait to get it out there?
Yes. It was the.
And I don't want you to give it away, but
I'm not giving any. I'm not giving any spoilers.
Exactly.
You got to listen in on Apple Podcasts, but it was a story. The one that I talked about from 1940. Mm-hmm. It was in Edgefield County, and it started off with a mule that wandered off of one farmer's property onto another's, and it ended up kicking a calf to death. So you got livestock on livestock murder, not really that exciting. Well, that set off this chain of events where you had adultery, murder for hire, the sheriff of Edgefield County got shot, armed standoffs, and even a U.S. senator was actually one of the centerpieces of this story. And it is wild, and it's one you've got to listen to from beginning to end. There's twists and turns all over it.
Is that one that's out already?
It's episode 3.
Nice.
Yes, that's called A Mule, a Murder for Hire, and Muscular Dexterity. And I'm not going to get into the muscular dexterity part here on your podcast. I don't think it's explicit, but it's a pretty wild tale. It was even featured in the London Examiner at that time.
So this was a story that went worldwide or went viral. It was the 1940s version of viral.
Yeah, it went worldwide, and it was something that I'd never heard of or never could have imagined.
Yeah.
And I ran across it at about 12:30 at night, laying in bed reading, scrolling, and I had to keep reading it again. And the next morning I said, I had to have dreamt that. That's so wild and bizarre That's outrageous, but yeah, it's the truth.
So was there a particular story or crime that you came across that inspired this whole project?
I think we got inspired. Now, I have a co-host. We've talked about her, Danielle Myers.
Yeah.
She's my sister-in-law. She works for SLED down in the Columbia area, and she deals a lot with the sex offender registry. Well, she's a nerd too. She's even a bigger nerd than me, and she enjoys anytime you see her with a book. She's reading about true crime or researching some kind of true crime, an anthology or these big reference books. And when we'd get together on family vacations, we'd kind of start swapping books and, hey, have you read this? Or, hey, have you looked at this or heard about this case? And we always go to Fripp Island where you ride around on the golf carts. And so me and my wife and Danielle and my brother, we'd ride around all hours of the night, and it eventually divulged into these conversations where we'd talk about these true crimes and these cases and how wild they were and how the investigators, this is my favorite part, how the investigators end up really finding out who perpetrated these crimes.
Yeah.
So we'd ride around all hours of the night talking about it, and we started thinking, and we said, hey, why don't we throw a line in the water, see if we could do a podcast about it.
That's awesome. And I love the idea because it seems so organic between the two of you. It's almost just like someone's going to just puts a microphone in between a conversation you'd be having anyway.
And that's what we like to have. I mean, yes, we're presenting the facts, but we also, I think one of the highlights and what's going to set us apart from other true crime podcasts are our opinions. We're just not reading off a page. We're just not telling you the story. We're going to put our 2 cents into, and folks may agree or not.
Have you come across anything that makes you think, I wonder if the investigators got this wrong? Or I wonder if the person that was actually convicted might not have actually been the perpetrator or something that was missed?
There's one, and that did happen. It's an upcoming episode where a man was convicted of murdering his wife. And 2 years later, this guy comes forward and starts it was a killer that wanted to be caught. He was a serial killer, and he ended up contacting the editor of a local newspaper and telling him where these bodies could be found, and he would go with the sheriff and find them, and then finally he led him to an area where there was no body, but it was the place that the lady was found 2 years before, and her husband was sitting in prison for murder.
Wow.
And when he was caught, this murderer eventually said, it's odd to believe that there's a serial killer with a conscience, but he said, I just can't let another man serve time for what I did.
Wow.
And he had gotten away with it scot-free.
But it wasn't killing somebody that was weighing on his conscience. It was the fact that somebody else was sitting in jail for it.
Right.
Wow. Of all the times to have a crisis of morality, that's where it finally hits you.
And that's going to be the title of it. It's going to be The Serial Killer with a Conscience.
Wow. That's going to be one I'm going to look forward to.
Yeah. So that's going to be coming out in a few weeks.